Good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Loy Parks. I am the Leadership Development and Institutional Strengthening Specialist with the Caribbean Center for Development Administration, CARICAD. Welcome to our June webinar. Just want to thank you so much for logging in early, for registering, and just looking forward to hearing your insights, your perspectives, your questions on this very, very important topic of transformation in social protection in our wonderful Caribbean. And a special welcome to those who I know will be watching this delayed. And also special welcome if this might be the very first time that you are joining any of our webinars. So if you're a first timer, we like to share the ground rules for this virtual learning space. We offer these webinars as a part of our service to our region to promote continuous learning and development. And so in this virtual learning space, to get the most out of it, there are a couple of ground rules that will help us to do just that. And one is to minimize our distractions. So you want to close all the other software applications on your devices and to mute your phones. Or if you can't mute your phones, you can certainly turn the ringer down, all right? And that would help. Your colleagues, we love them all, but they can be a source of distraction as well. And so we want to invite you to just crave their indulgence. Ask them to allow you the opportunity to focus and to learn, or just for this next hour, all right? And you know what? If it is at all possible, invite them. Invite them to join you on the webinar, right? And there is still time, and if you think of somebody right now who you know would benefit from hearing more about this topic, please do invite them, send them the link, and they can still register and join us. And speaking of joining, we always ask this question: where are you joining us from today? And so invite you to just use the chat and to share with us exactly where you're joining us from today. So I am joining you from my island home, Jamaica, right? And I see in the chat a number of persons who are regular attendees, and I want to welcome you all. I want to shout out to my Trini sister, Lucia, right? I see Commissioner of Police, Antigua and Barbuda, Atlee Rodney, welcome. I Chief Welfare Officer, Government of Barbados, Deborah Norville, and one of our alumni, right? Elizabeth Emmanuel from CRIF SPC. Now, Elizabeth was one of our presenters in our just concluded Climate Governance webinar series. And she touched a bit on this topic of social protection in the context of how we respond to our climate change challenges. And I see this webinar as building on some of the things that were shared there, right? Teresina Fergus from Montserrat, welcome. Valdine, my sister from Jamaica, Child Protection Agency, I'm not calling the full name, it's just me now, but I see so many of you. Sean from the JDF, Maxine, currently in our Transformation Leadership Development Program. So many of you have seen you on webinars and other programs. Welcome, right? So Andrine is joining from Jamaica, yes. Charolyn, hi Charolyn, my coachee from Antigua. Claytine from Montserrat. Jacinth from BVI, yes. Kendall from BVI Police, great. Claudette from Antigua, yes. David from St. Lucia. Lelia also from St. Lucia. Lots of folks from BVI and St. Lucia today. Crystal from BVI and Carol from Grenada. Nika from St. Lucia. Lisa from Barbados. Carlton from Anguilla. Carlton is one of our faithful attendees. Quasi, I hope I'm pronouncing that name, from TNT. Danelle from BVI. Tessa from St. Lucia. Welcome, Tessa. Another of our alumni, Davian from Barbados. Yes. Darnley from St. Lucia. Sunny, St. Lucia. Yes, indeed. Jacqueline Messiah Simeon, also from St. Lucia. All right. So good to have you all. We're really so glad. And quite a few of you are already logged into the room here. Valerie West from Trinidad and Tobago. All right. So here is the opening question that I think we want to explore. We want to hear from you. We want you to type using the chat. And what we are curious about is this. And you see the question there. What, in your mind, are the most pressing policy challenges that we are faced with in the Caribbean as it relates to social protection? You can type in the chat. You can even just raise your hand and we can help you, give you permission to unmute. But what for you are the most pressing policy challenges that we are dealing with as it relates to social protection? And while you ponder that question, I want to welcome those who are just logging in. Thank you so very much for joining us. So Darnley, I see that hand. You should be able to unmute. Go right ahead.
Good morning to all.
Good morning, Darnley. Hearing you.
I believe right now we are faced with multiple challenges, but greatest among them are our ability to take care of the most vulnerable after traumatic events. And for us, that would be events triggered by climate change or man-made disasters. So yeah, that would be first and foremost for me.
All right. No, I definitely agree with you. I think for mine, in addition to that, I am thinking about the fact that we have an aging population. In many of our countries, our birth rate has dropped. And so the protection for the elderly as a growing vulnerable group is one that is top of mind for me. Atlee has mentioned in the chat the need for facilities to provide the services needed for vulnerable groups, so that they can have the best quality life. Yes, I so agree. Carlton, he sees one of the policy challenges is financing. Yes, everything needs money. It takes cash to care. How are we going? What are the financing options as it relates to social protection? And there are lots of thinking and innovations around that have been emerging in the Caribbean. Any other thoughts? Thanks for sharing. So Alisa says, one of the challenges is equity in distribution, ensuring that we meet the needs of those who really need it. Yeah. How do we prevent abuse of the system? How do we eliminate corruption? Yes. How do we truly ensure that we're not overlooking people who really are in need? Thank you so much for that, Alicia. Darnley, I like that one. And that's something that I know our presenter is going to touch on. How do we prevent dependency as well? Because surely we do not wish to have a social protection system that creates generational dependency on social protection programs and funding. Jacqueline, and I see somebody has put a thumbs up to this, better service coordination. Yes, we have a plethora of different services under the broad umbrella of social protection. How do they ensure that they work in sync and not across purposes. Carlton has pointed out that, so in Anguilla, they've just initiated something where the elderly, 70 years and older, receive free medical. And it's called Seniors Shield. Oh, I like that. I like that, Carlton. And so during the discussion segment, certainly you're invited to share a little bit more on that. All right. And so, like Carlton, please, we're not all starting at ground zero. So you want to also share in the chat, what are some of the initiatives that are happening in your country around social protection, right? So Sean has put in the chat, one of his concerns is the accountability of the state for providing and maintaining adequate public infrastructure. Yes, it's one thing to have the infrastructure, but do we have accountability for how we maintain those services to those who are in need of social protection? So Darnley is also sharing, some of the things that are happening in St. Lucia. So St. Lucia just launched a universal health coverage for maternal and child care. Ooh, yes. So this is really free medical services for mothers and their new babies. So Valdine says one of the challenges as she sees it as it relates to social protection is, how do we provide low-income housing opportunities? Oh my goodness, this is the billion-dollar question, and it is a challenge not just in our region. It is something that has become a very serious global challenge. We have seen in many, many economies, the cost of real estate has simply gone through the roof. And how do we provide lower cost housing for low income group? Because if people aren't living in adequate housing, it leads to a whole other slew of social challenges. So Dylan, I'm going to make an assumption you are joining us from Belize. Welcome. So he's saying in Belize, they're currently working on the social protection floor and an SPS strategy, which is inclusive of shock response elements. All right, thanks for sharing that, Dylan. Thanks for sharing that so much, because here is the thing that we want to do. We want to use these opportunities not only to learn from our presenter, but to learn from each other. So I love that. There's no need for us to reinvent the wheel. There's so much that we can learn from each other, all right? And so we want to use the opportunity, in a webinar space, maybe I could challenge them, but hey, reach out to us. And so we can try to help you to connect with others working in this field. If you want to learn more about what they're doing and what lessons you can learn from that, all right? So, Carlton is dittoing what I'm saying. Utilize its benefits. Do not reinvent the wheel. Okay. So with that, I just want to share just a wee little bit about CARICAD. We are an arm of CARICOM, and our role is to support member states in the area of public sector transformation, something that we have been doing for over 40 years. And we do so through a number of services. And what you see on the board here is just a listing of our main services that we provide, either via technical assistance or through capacity building. And so these include technical assistance to improve areas of governance and policy development, human resource management and development, organizational development, strategic planning, results-based management, business process analysis, just to name a few. And we also provide capacity building in the area of leadership development, strategic planning, human resource management, And we also provide a number of templates and toolkits around succession planning, around leadership development practice assessments, among others. Probably chief among them is our public sector transformation assessment tool, where we can work with an organization or with a government to help you to assess where are you right now as it relates to public sector transformation, and using that data as a benchmark and to help you to formulate and implement your public sector transformation strategy. And this slide is really talking about our Charter for the Public Service. We have created a common framework for us to use in order to have a harmonized approach to public sector transformation. And it is based on 6 pillars, and you see them there: capacity, standards, legislation, openness of government, accountability, and governance. And if you visit our website, you will get a lot more information about that. And our website is www.caricad.net. All right. And so it is my absolute delight to introduce one of our esteemed alumni and today's presenter. She is none other than Platinum Leader, Dr. Uralise Delaire, from the beautiful country of St. Lucia. And social protection is really the area that she works in. I was very fascinated by the work that she has been doing along with her team. And when she did our leadership development program last year, she, along with others, she had to do a leadership stretch project. And her stretch project related to a particular aspect of social protection transformation. And as I read some of the stuff that she was doing, how she was applying her leadership lessons to this particular transformation, I was so impressed. And I said, Uralise, you have got to do a webinar for us on this. And so she agreed. And so, Uralise, I invite you to unmute, turn on your camera, share your slides, and to take it away as she shares with us on this topic, transformation in social protection, looking at it from a Caribbean context. Welcome, Uralise.
Good morning, Dr. Parks. Good morning to all the listeners and persons on this webinar. And thank you for the invitation, Dr. Parks. As Dr. Parks indicated, I will be presenting on transformation in social protection in the Caribbean. Social protection is not a new phenomenon in the Caribbean, as social policies are almost as old as the modern state itself. As early as the 17th century, the British established laws for the protection of the poor with the construction of the welfare state. The majority of Caribbean islands implemented social protection schemes shortly after independence, and these were modeled after the United Kingdom's Provident Fund. The term social protection is very elusive and varies from state to state or one region to another. Hence, there is no universal definition of what social protection is, what programs it should comprise, and what should be left out of its scope. Although it has become one of the pillars of social development strategies in both the region and the rest of the world, no approach to social protection exists. On the contrary, countries, international organizations, and experts see it from different perspectives and different analytical and political viewpoints. It is also important to note that countries have different traditions determined by different social norms and historical processes, Thus, different instruments with similar purposes prevail within the social protection system. You find that because different organizations in different parts of the world use different terms or concepts, the language regarding social protection can be confusing, and the term sometimes drifts from its semantic mooring to mean social security. In other cases, however, social security only refers to social insurance mechanisms. So watch out when people talk about social security. Do they mean social insurance only or social protection as a whole? Similarly, microfinance programs or comprehensive anti-poverty interventions, such as graduation programs, are framed as social protection by some, but not by others. I will provide an overview of a widely accepted definition of social protection, particularly used in low and middle income countries. Social protection can be understood as programs that aim to support persons living in poverty by providing them cash or food transfers that protect everyone vulnerable against livelihood risks, such as illness or unemployment, and that helps to improve the status of those who are excluded and marginalized, as posited by the World Bank. Whatever the definition, scope, or viewpoint used, social protection programs or policies fulfill 4 main purposes or interventions. 1, they must be protective. There must be interventions to relieve conditions of poverty and deprivation by providing basic levels of support for basic needs to be met, example, monetary or cash transfers, and social services. 2, they must be preventive. The interventions should help to prevent people from falling into poverty when they experience a shock that either stops them from earning an income or costs a lot of money, such as illness or flood. They must be promotive. Programs should try to support people's ability to earn a living on their own so that they no longer need support. They must be transformative. Measures should seek to promote social justice, social equity, inclusion, empowerment, and patterns of equality. Social protection can be classified under 3 main headings. It depends on the school of thought, you might see 4 or 5 headings, but generally we classify them under these 3 headings. 1, social assistance, and that includes interventions that provide basic transfers. They are also referred to as non-contributory, as one does not have to pay into the scheme in order to get support. And examples include cash transfers to persons on the public assistance program, school feeding programs, book and food voucher bursaries, etc. Social insurance, and this refers to interventions that provide support in case a shock happens. They are also referred to as contributory interventions because one has to pay into the scheme in order to benefit. Examples include health insurance or unemployment insurance. And the third one, labor market interventions, which focuses on getting people into work. They can be formal or informal types of work. There are many types or forms of interventions, and they can range from skills training to public works programs, which are temporary in nature. My task is to outline the transformation of social protection in the Caribbean. I will endeavor to do so, giving examples from various islands where possible and where necessary. By and large, social protection systems in the region have remained unchanged, other than parametric changes made at irregular intervals with no real reform taking place. Parametric reform involves changing the parameters of systems, example, increasing the amount given to a person or increasing the number of persons saved. It may also involve adding another vulnerable constituent to the system. A structural change, on the other hand, refers to a complete overhaul of the social protection system. which may be relevant to the long-term viability of such systems. Parametric reforms are easier, quicker, and cheaper to implement. So the first transformation we are going to look at is graduation. Social protection interventions were typically conceived of as short-term measures. The short-termism also had to do with the idea of not encouraging dependency on public welfare. However, there is now a growing issue in the region whereby persons have become lifelong members of the public assistance program. Understandably, some households do not have graduation potential because of debilitating circumstances, but for the majority, this does not have to be the case. There should be interventions to transform livelihoods through investment in human capital, labor market interventions, and other productive activities that would mitigate the intergenerational transmission of poverty. St. Lucia is the first and only OECS island, at least presently, with a graduation strategy. This strategy is linked to the Public Assistance Program, which is our cash transfer scheme. The strategy outlines 5 pathways for selected households to graduate out of the system. The first pathway is entrepreneurship, which focuses on enabling those who are engaged in or interested in entrepreneurial activities. Human capital resilience pathway, providing technical and vocational training and certification, job placement, and other related support to persons. Active labor market inclusion pathway, providing job placement support, tailored training, and on-the-job training to strengthen links between skills development and employment. Livelihoods activity strengthening pathway, to connect relevant household members to livelihood training activities that may enhance their productivity. Vulnerability and risk reduction pathway. This is an area that seems to be common in the region, whereby persons who are deemed poor have assets, especially land, that they are tied up in some form of family dispute. So this pathway will provide asset strengthening support via social service agencies to help with conflict mediation, in particular around land rights, securing livelihood assets, for example, assisting with obtaining identification documents, legal or other pertinent documents such as legal land titles, so as to enable participation in agriculture, housing, etc. Another area of transformation is in social information systems. All of the OECS islands provide a range of social programs and benefits. Many of these social assistance programs are delivered by various institutions, including government agencies, non-government organizations, and the private sector. In many islands, the Ministry of Education, Health, and Social Development provides similar services. Some of these cut across administrative levels and sectors, with each institution determining its social assistance policies, budget allocation, program selection, and delivery chain. These approaches are not interoperable and suffer from a fragmented institutional framework that lacks clear and updated procedures. These are also rudimentary, resulting in inefficiencies and high operation costs to beneficiaries and program administrators. Similarly, many islands continue to manually perform tasks that could be automatized. We miss out on opportunities to exploit valuable data to inform policy making. And this hampers the opportunity to connect potential beneficiaries with benefits. Later in my presentation, you will understand why the OECS has decided to make the need for quality statistical information and comparable data across time and space a priority area. And this has been a sore point for most islands. And I think we can all agree that there needs to be a movement towards greater complementarity between programs. Latin America and the Dominican Republic have comprehensive social information systems that incorporate social and beneficiary registries, which enables them to roll out social assistance programs more effectively and avoid problems that are inherent in the lack of coordinated approaches. I am pleased to report that the World Bank funded St. Lucia Human Capital Resilience Project is supporting the design and implementation of a social information system. It focuses on strengthening St. Lucia's social protection system by enhancing the targeting mechanism of social protection programs, increasing coverage through the expansion of the main social safety net program, and improving implementation. A consultant has been contracted to design and formulate a cohesive system. Another area is shock responsive social protection. As you know, the Caribbean is highly vulnerable to climate change, natural disasters, and economic shocks. The vulnerability of the islands is expected to increase with time as global temperatures rise and the frequency and intensity of natural disasters increase. Hence, there is a growing need to make the social protection system shock responsive to allow persons to prepare for, cope with, and respond to shocks. Countries should be able to scale up and down their social protection or social assistance programs in times of acute need, usually in relation to covariate climate-related shocks or natural disaster, such as droughts and floods, or conflict or health-related shock. I am proud to say that all the islands, to some degree or another, have been putting measures in place to make their social protection system shock responsive, although they are at different stages of doing so. You will agree with me that shock responsive social protection is an imperative, and as we are not left with much of a choice. In St. Lucia, the ministry felt it prudent to formalize its national response to shocks. With assistance from the World Food Programme, we put together an operations manual to standardize the process and close any operational gaps. While this document outlines proposed standard operating procedures, the purpose is to lay the groundwork towards the development of more targeting SOPs over time as processes and procedures evolve. Another huge area for the Caribbean is in disaster risk financing. And this is as part of the shock response in social protection. And it is the move to link disaster risk financing to social protection. Over the past 41 years, on average, a tropical storm or hurricane has impacted the region every year. The region's risk from climate hazard is growing as climate change accelerates, putting the country's development plans at risk. When shocks occur, poor and non-poor households endure substantial asset losses. And this deepens poverty and also push non-poor households into poverty. Caribbean governments have recognized these growing risks and are actively developing comprehensive disaster risk management approaches to address them through innovative means to transfer support to disaster-affected households and individuals using social protection mechanisms and adapting these systems to mitigate the economic impact of shocks on households. So I'm just going to give you some examples of disaster risk financing. Pilot top-up of CRIF coverage. The World Food Programme provided a top-up on Dominica's premium for its CRIF tropical cyclone parametric insurance policy. If the policy is triggered through a tropical cyclone or hurricane, a portion of the parametric insurance payouts will be used for immediate cash payments to those directly affected through the National Social Protection Program. The pilot was implemented in 2021-2022 and continued in 2022-2023 policy years. This innovative approach promotes a rapid and efficient response by directly linking disaster risk finance with social protection programming. St. Lucia is currently in discussion with the WFP to pilot a similar initiative later this year. There is a FHP, which is the Flexible Hurricane Protection, and it's also a parametric insurance product providing hurricane protection in Dominica. It is offered through a mobile wallet where customers can purchase insurance protection for between 200 US and 100,000 US dollars. The wallet also offers a range of financial services, including sending and receiving money, making purchases, and paying bills. There is also the catastrophe insurance coverage for microfinance clients, what you call FONCOs. And it is Haiti's largest microfinance institution, launched mandatory catastrophe insurance coverage for its clients through its Core W programming that was done in 2011. The catastrophe insurance product protected small-scale women traders against the impacts of a large-scale earthquake, flood, and wind events. In the event of a shock, clients received an emergency payout of US 125. Their loan balances were canceled and they could apply for a new loan. Unfortunately, the product was suspended in 2012. It didn't last very long, just 1 year, as it proved to be financially unsustainable due to the very high frequency of payouts that were experienced. The other area is risk transfer products to support housing and reconstruction. Notable examples of insurance or risk transfer solutions supporting housing and reconstruction exist in the region. For instance, in Trinidad and Tobago, CRIFT SPC payout went towards housing damage in assisting families to purchase building materials and appliances. There's also the forecast-based anticipatory action, and this is an innovative approach that enables the implementation and financing of actions before an extreme weather event has occurred. Forecast-based finance and anticipatory action aim to reduce the impact and prevent or mitigate the effects of extreme weather or disasters on food security and nutrition of highly vulnerable people based on forecast or early warning information. St. Lucia, in collaboration with the WFP again, will be piloting the AA during this year's hurricane season. The other area of transformation in the region is the vulnerability index. Some of you have heard of it, but may not necessarily know what it's all about. But 2 years ago, with the assistance of WFP again, St. Lucia piloted a vulnerability index that enables the social assistance program to support households most vulnerable and impacted by weather-related hazards and other shocks by informing response planning, assistance targeting, and delivery. So the index is a composite tool that rates a person's or household's priority through socioeconomic deprivation, resilience capacity, and hazard susceptibility. The socioeconomic deprivation is calculated using the targeting tool that we use for our public assistance program. It is called the SLNet 3.0, and it really stands for St. Lucia National Eligibility Test. It is a proxy means test to construct a scoring formula and a cutoff point for determining eligibility for placement on the public assistance program. And it takes into consideration multidimensional poverty. And by that, I mean food security, housing, income, household size, access to amenities, the health of family members, etc. It is a comprehensive interview done with vulnerable persons where they receive a score which determines which welfare group they belong to. The other area is the resilience capacity dimension, that reflects a household's ability to effectively prepare for, cope with, and recover from natural hazards or other shocks. Resilience considers how people can use their abilities, their knowledge, assets, social and family networks, and other resources to manage the impacts of shocks and disaster. The resilience indicators were grouped into 3 categories: mobility, access to services, and safety nets. The third dimension is the hazard impact dimension, and it is an adapted version of Dana methodology. And it's really a household's overall level of impact, and that is classified based on the indicator for which the level of damage was highest. Hurricane Elsa occurred on July 2nd, 2021, a couple months before piloting the vulnerability index. So a sample was readily available for the pilot since a list of affected persons had already been compiled. But even without a disaster, we are able to determine the baseline vulnerability, which is very significant, as it enables us to determine who are the persons most likely to be affected in a disaster, and provide advance payment prior to impact. In that case, we can prepare more effectively for an impending shock. We also did the livelihood analysis at the same time when we did the vulnerability index, and it is to inform the targeting and design of shock responsive social protection programs and climate resilience interventions of the government and its partners. And this was done by analyzing the impact of a hurricane event on livelihood groups in St. Lucia. The livelihoods approach presents an opportunity to understand the varying impacts on livelihood groups based on their risk of exposure, wealth, seasonality, diversity, resiliency, and geography. The analytical framework of this study is based on the Farming Early Warning System and WFP methodologies for livelihood assessments, and comprises the following outputs that are listed on the slide. So you could just go through them quickly. Information from the vulnerability index and the livelihoods analysis have been represented on geographic information systems, and clusters can be used to inform policy and predict future impacts and risks. Another area of transformation is digitization of social assistance payments. The emergence of digital services in the Caribbean presents an opportunity for faster, cheaper, and more user-friendly payments and greater access to financial services. Through a partnership with the World Food Programme, CARICAD member states and other stakeholders explored the opportunities and challenges of digital payments for social protection programs and the potential for promoting financial inclusion and women's economic empowerment. Dominica has a wealth of experience in using social protection to respond to various large-scale shocks, including in response to Hurricane Maria, which affected the island in 2017, and COVID-19. Payment information of beneficiaries were electronically uploaded to the platform with identification, signature, and supporting documentation. This enabled a timely and efficient reconciliation of payments. Building on this partnership, the digital payment reconciliation processes will be rolled out for the public assistance program, and an integrated management information system will be developed for social protection programs in the not too distant future. In St. Lucia, over 80% of persons on the public assistance program receive their benefits electronically. In 2021, we piloted a digitized payment system to persons who were affected by Hurricane Elsa. Payments were made through Penny Pinch, which is a digital financing platform that allows for peer-to-peer transfers, bill payments, business payments, and so on. This is all done via a verified e-wallet account where users may conduct transactions. This mobile application always allows customers to receive rewards, cashback, and coupons from a variety of businesses. So the intention is to continue using this payment system along with ECCB's Dcash during the anticipatory action disaster risk financing pilot this hurricane season. In Haiti, again, the government gained some experience in using digital payment services for social protection, revealing both opportunities and challenges. As part of its COVID-19 response, electronic payments were made to beneficiaries through Digicel's MonCash mobile money service. However, limited account ownership, low rate of adoption of mobile money services in rural areas, and operational mismatches between local governments and service providers user lists proved to be key challenges in reaching beneficiaries. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has revolutionized its payment system from cash to providing their beneficiaries with cards similar to debit cards, which can be used to purchase their necessities. These cards are topped up monthly or when necessary electronically without beneficiaries having to go to any financial institution or in unfavorable weather. Apart from CARICOM, the largest other regional grouping is the OECS. So I wanted to just plug in the impact on social protection in the region. The OECS Social Inclusion and Social Protection Strategic Framework is informed by several regional policies that address the social inclusion and protection of OECS population. Article 23 of the revised Treaty of Bastille envisages the development and adoption of a harmonized common policy framework for human and social development using the life cycle approach. Article 12.3 focuses on contingent rights, which articulates the need to extend social protection rights to persons who can move freely within the economic union. So in an effort to fully succeed at social and human development, there is need to provide both quality statistical information and comparable data across time and space. Social statistics are intrinsic to acknowledging the gaps in accessing resources among the most vulnerable and addressing these gaps. The RSDS comprises 5 strategic priorities, and they are listed on the slide. All of them comprise statistical developments and the sharing of data. So it is expected, therefore, that OECS member states will move towards the standardized provision of social protection. They may not do so at the same pace, but would reach the same destination using the route most convenient to each state. Apart from CARICOM and the OECS, several international development partners and funding agencies have shaped the landscape of social protection in the region. One may argue that the changes will welcome developments, but many a times they were prescriptive in nature. Some donor agencies have expertise in certain fields that they capitalize on. Example, the World Bank has been the lead donor in policy dialogue with poor countries. UNICEF has clear expertise in social policy, which gives them an authoritative platform for a central role, and the World Food Programme specializes in food security. These influences began in about 2001, when the World Bank expanded the remit of safety nets and developed social risk management as a conceptual approach to social protection. It framed social protection as consisting of public interventions that, 1, assist individual households and communities in better managing risk, and 2, provide support to the critically poor and vulnerable. The World Bank also identified 2 types of risks: idiosyncratic risk, which affects individuals or households, and they can include illness, disability, or just being a victim of crime. Covariant risk, which affect larger groups. They can be climatic, example, floods or droughts; social, including terrorism or gang activity and conflicts; economic, such as financial risk and unemployment; health, example, pandemics; or environment, deforestation, pollution, etc. The list of risks is by no means exhaustive. The idea of transformative social protection was developed in 2004 by the Center for Social Protection in response to existing work on social protection, suggesting that social protection should not merely try to address symptoms of poverty, but also tackle structural causes of poverty and inequality by focusing on legislation, regulatory framework, and delivery of programs. And many countries have taken heed and are now revising their policy and legislation, social protection legislation. In 2011, the ILO led the initiative on the social protection floor, which is a nationally designed set of basic social security guarantees that should ensure, as a minimum, that over the life cycle, all in need have access to essential healthcare and basic income security, which together secure effective access to goods and services. It can be considered the operationalization of the rights-based approach to social protection. It stipulates that everyone in need should have access to income security and health. This school of thought initiative has impacted the world over, as governments are forced to take account of the different risks and vulnerabilities that affect citizens at different stages in life, from the cradle to the grave, and design strategies to address these risks at each stage. This concept has been embraced by all Caribbean islands. In St. Lucia, only last week we launched Universal Healthcare Program, as Danielle indicated. There is Universal Early Childhood, primary and secondary education, and feeding programs with produce from local farmers at most primary schools. The number of scholarships to post-secondary institutions have quadrupled, and persons of working age have been enrolled in different programs. Example, the HOPE program with the SSDF, to increase productivity and reduce unemployment among youth and women. The elderly and persons with disabilities are provided with home caregivers to assist with their daily needs, while there is a universal grant for persons with disabilities. There has also been a thrust and rush for inclusion of persons with disabilities into mainstream and specialized social protection. As we on persons with disabilities, I think in the Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean, Jamaica perhaps has the most impressive social protection program for persons with disabilities. I had the honor of a study tour in Jamaica last year, where I visited the mustard seed communities and met with personnel from the Ministry of Education. So any country wishing to see, the work that needs to be done for persons with disabilities can, go to Jamaica and see what the good work that they are doing. Similarly, with the assistance of UN Women and ILO, a lot of emphasis has been placed on the productivity and inclusion of women in the workforce, highlighting the issue of equal pay and unpaid labor. In 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals firmly placed social protection at the heart of the social and development policy. Social protection is mentioned explicitly in 5 goals, mostly in relation to reducing poverty. That's SDG 1, and inequality in SDG 10. This presents an important extension to the Millennium Development Goals, which did not refer to social protection. The Global Partnership for Universal Social Protection 2030 was established in 2016 and is led by the ILO and World Bank in partnership with many other international organizations, example, OECD and UNDP. Universal social protection ensures that anyone who needs social protection can access it at any time. This is an expensive venture which most countries can ill afford. More than half of the global population, that's about 4 billion people, still has no access to even one social protection benefit. 45% of the global population receives only one social protection benefit. Progress has been best in old age pensions, with 68% of older persons receiving a pension. However, child and family benefits are limited to 1/3 of the world's children. 1.3 billion children do not have social protection. The numbers worsen for persons with disabilities. Only 28% receive social protection benefits. You can well imagine what the statistics are for the Caribbean and how far we are from universal social protection. In 2019, both the World Bank and UNICEF adopted the term shock-responsive social protection. When you read any World Bank document, you will see the terminology adaptive social protection rather than shock-responsive. But basically, they mean the same, it just depends on who's speaking. I have discussed shock-responsive social protection in the region, so I will not expand any further. Finally, in 2020, there was a movement by all countries to provide social protection in response to COVID-19. Countries around the world expanded existing programs or established new schemes to protect against the socioeconomic consequences of the pandemic. Many persons lost their jobs and fell into a new vulnerable group called the transient poor. All Caribbean islands provided support to the poor and vulnerable in the forms of vertical and horizontal expansions of their systems, provided hygiene and care packages, food packages, psychosocial support, income support, educational and other economic relief packages. The pandemic exposed the underbelly of the social protection system in our region and highlighted the importance of strong, adequate, and flexible social protection systems. The size of the expansion and the speed at which benefits were rolled out emphasized the potential for social protection and social assistance to become further ingrained in countries' social policy tools. With assistance from the World Bank, St. Lucia completed and approved its revised social protection policy and the communication strategy. I am not sure that this development can be credited to the pandemic, but it sure helped to expedite the process. Similarly, with assistance from UNICEF, the social protection bill is being revised and should be adopted later this year. Finally, discussions about social protection tend to focus mostly on formal interventions. And by formal, I mean interventions that are implemented by the government or by NGOs. Despite long-standing and widespread forms of informal social protection, these are not often taken into account. Such forms include community-based support groups, savings, example, SUSU, and lending associations, or remittances from family members in the diaspora who help each other in difficult times. The region's territories clearly differ in the progress they have made towards strengthening their social protection systems and in their preferences with regard to policy instruments. However, the region is in a stage of progressive construction of social citizenship, both in terms of protection and in the promotion of human development. This sense of epochal shift looks unscripted and improvised, consisting of one-off measures that lack any general framework and initiatives with no coordinated overall basis. Efforts have been varied and fragmentary, like the pieces of a jigsaw, combining regulatory and technical aspects without there necessarily having been any break in continuity. These social policies were designed only to act upon the supposedly temporary problems of people living in poverty, without looking more widely at the structural problems of the population as a whole. However, we are a resilient people, and we are known to bounce back after difficult times. The route to social development seems long, but with each step, the distance is shortened. We should give the poor and vulnerable a voice, but more importantly, the opportunity to be part of their own development. Towards this end, the ministries of social services and development partners must formulate inclusive, progressive, and sustainable policies to create this enabling environment. I thank you.
And we thank you too. I mean, that was such a wealth of information that you have shared. And so we are going to jump right into comments and questions. And so one of the first questions was really a comment, really. So Dion Jennings from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security in Jamaica. Thank you for joining so much, Dion. And she says, while she admits that, you know, some good work has been happening in Jamaica as it relates to persons with disabilities, but there still needs to be more employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. And so I am curious, what are your thoughts about what can be some of the policy actions, transformative policy actions that we could take to improve employment opportunities for persons with disabilities? So Uralise, just asking your take on this.
Sorry, Dr. Parks, can you just read the question again, please?
Right, so what is your take on what can be some of the transformative policy actions we could take to improve employment opportunities for persons with disabilities?
This is a very interesting question. And persons with disabilities have been, are you hearing me, Dr. Parks?
Hearing you loud and clear, yes.
Okay, yes. One of the areas that must be looked at is legislation for persons with disabilities to include them in the workforce. In some countries, there are requirements for businesses in terms of a quota, where depending on the size of the organization, there must be a certain number of persons with disabilities. And government also provides, in some places, exemptions for businesses that have employed persons with disabilities. And so these are two areas. We can also improve the skills of persons with disabilities. One of the challenges that businesses have complained about is that persons with disabilities, some of them do not have the technical skills. So we can equip them with those skills, provide training for them in whatever area that they can become employable. So these are three areas we could look at for persons with disabilities, and also provide them with financing. Some of them are skillful, they could become entrepreneurs. So basically, these are things that we can do.
Okay, great. I know for the government of Jamaica, and I think part of the problem is that a lot of people just don't know what obtains, but there are special financial arrangements that can be put in place to help persons with disabilities, for instance, to convert their motor vehicles to make them access friendly. We can there's special arrangements that can be made to ensure that we have, whatever software or hardware or other equipment that will enable them to be productive in their employment. So part of the thing, I think, is just also making those benefits known, better public education around this, not only for persons with disabilities, but for current and potential employers. Here is another question. How can regional governments attract the private sector to play a bigger role in our regional social protection systems? So what are your thoughts, Uralise? And if others who are here present have any ideas around, this question, also feel free to, raise your hand and share your thoughts. But Uralise, what are your thoughts on this?
Interestingly, Dr. Parks, last week when we had a conference with persons from the business sector, banks and financial sector, we were looking at, digitizing certain payment systems and, using Dcash. And the private sector is not sensitized on what social protection is. They have no idea what we do, what it entails, and so on. So we spent a lot of the time really explaining social protection to them. And they were awed by, what was being said. They said, but how come we don't know that? So it means that we really need to have a strategy, communication strategy, to go out there and talk about social protection, what we do, the impact that the private sector can have on, poverty in the region, and how they can help improve the social protection system. I think the private sector has not been doing much because they have not been invited by the government and other stakeholders to have this discussion. And so I think the first step is really to, have that discussion, have that conversation on social protection, because poverty impacts all sectors. And if we do not have this conversation, we do not take that first step, then, we are going to continue to drown in poverty in the region.
No, indeed. And I see a number of comments really reinforcing what you have just said. I'm going to invite, I see the hand, Elizabeth Emmanuel from CRIF SPC. Liz, I think you should be, yes, you're unmuted now. Go right ahead. Hi, Liz, are you hearing us? All right, so Liz, I see your microphone unmuted, but for some reason we are not hearing you. So while we wait on Liz to just adjust her microphone, and Darnley shared, education is a very large part of the progress that we need to make. And it's about sensitizing the public and what actually obtains with the poor and the vulnerable. And that this will help to dispel a number of the notions or the misconceptions even, and that people may have, which could be preventing them from moving into assisting as part of the social protection solutions. Una, saying excellent presentation, and says, indeed, ministries of social protection need to formulate policies to achieve universal social protection. And that much more can be done for persons living with disabilities. The processing of benefits of this group can be long and frustrating in a lot of instances. Indeed, and this is why, transformation is necessary. All right. I think we do have the opportunity for at least one more question or comment. I see all these things in the chat, and Neela saying very interesting topic, great presentation, says Lika. Oh, Valdine Harris has a question, and she's asking you to repeat or to clarify the two types of risks that exist. So you had mentioned risks in the as a part of your presentation you release.
Yes, there were idiosyncratic risks and covariate risk. Some people say covariant or covariate risk. This will by the World Bank here.
So can you just provide a little bit more explanation on what each of those mean?
Okay, idiosyncratic risks are risks that affect the individual, like illness, disability, and so on. And covariate risks are risks that affect a larger population, like you have flooding and other disasters, bigger issues. Those that affect large populations are called covariate risk, and those that affect the individual are called idiosyncratic risks.
All right, thanks for that. I see Roseanne, your hand is up. I think you should be able to unmute now, Roseanne.
Hi, good morning, everybody. And I also want to say excellent, excellent presentation. And even as I listened and I heard about the communication strategy, I wanted to interject and say something about it, because I got introduced to the topic of social protection through disaster risk financing course that is being offered by CRIF, or it was developed by CRIF. So even Elizabeth Emmanuel, who should be speaking in a little while. And it was then that my whole everything opened up to the broadness and the importance of social protection system. And I'm a lecturer at the University of the West Indies in disaster management. And at no point have we ever included a topic on social protection. And so I see the academia as an avenue to raise awareness also about the whole social protection. There are different, I suppose, UTEC, UE, if a course or a short course, or it can be a part of a course, it can be included as part of a course, the whole module on social protection, because it's a critical part of the disaster discussion. So even as you think about a communication system or what can be done, I think that that is also an avenue to raise awareness of the work that is being done on social protection systems and its importance when it comes to disaster risk management.
Well, thank you so much for that, Roseanne. And we always need to look for the opportunities for that collaboration and partnership, and the collaboration with academia to ensure that the academic training in these areas are fit for purpose, and really getting persons who pursue these programs to understand these various topics in the most holistic way. So important. We're going to try and see if we can get Liz to speak again. Liz, one more time. Okay, Liz, we're still not hearing you, although your microphone is unmuted. So sorry about that. So Dion is saying the course offered at UA under social policy and administration. in case anybody has a particular interest in that area and want to pursue further academic studies. We're just here trying to see. I think poor Lizzie, her microphone is just not working right today. So very sorry, because I'm sure she had really added some value. But if you wanted to maybe type in the chat, Liz, any of the comments you wanted to add to this discourse. And so while you do that, okay, yes, she did put it in the chat. So Liz wants to stress the role that social development and social protection ministries can play in promoting and using microinsurance as part of their strategy to make their social protection mechanisms more shock responsive. So she gives an example. As part of their government subvention, they can purchase microinsurance products that protect against climate-related disasters. And so CRIF is about to launch a microinsurance product in St. Lucia, Jamaica, Grenada, Belize, and Trinidad and Tobago. And if a policy is a trigger, microinsurance can be used as a mechanism to expand horizontally as well as vertically our social protection mechanisms. And at the sovereign level, CRIF payouts are used to expand social protection systems in times of disasters, as at least 62% of payouts have been used to support the most vulnerable in countries. Also, the CRIF Coast product for fishery sector, it's a sovereign product where payouts go directly to the fisher folk, and we want to make sure we're including the women in that sector as well. So there are some really good things that are happening already, and there are even more potential additional products that can come on board to expand our social protection provisions. So Liz, thank you so much for sharing that. And so, Madam Dr. Uralise Delaire, I want to give you a last word. And if there was one key takeaway you wanted everybody to remember from this presentation, what would that be? I invite you to unmute and to just share your parting words with us.
Yes, Dr. Parks, thank you. Social protection is the business of everyone. It is not just for government. It is for the private sector. It is for the government. It is for all institutions, because when poverty affects one individual, it affects everybody in the country. As you know, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And there are so many issues that come about as a result of poverty. So if we do not assist the poor and vulnerable, then we will all be affected in one way or another. So I want all of us to understand that social protection is the business of everyone. And it's not because we are, we feel that we are well off, we are employed, that we shouldn't pay any attention to it. But the effects, the ripple effects, will be greater for those who do not pay attention. Thank you.
And Uralise, thank you so much for taking the time and the effort to share what Jodianne is calling a most excellent presentation. I saw a quick question in the chat. Tessa is asking, are we helping organizations in Guyana? So maybe I would turn it around to you, Tessa, to say, if your organization needs some help in this area, do reach out to us here at CARICAD, and we can connect you with our partners around the region to see how best you can get assistance, insights, etc., from others in this area of transformation in social protection. And so with that, I just want to wrap up our webinar by sharing a couple of announcements. And one is, we want you to save the date. We will be having on July 11, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Caribbean time, all the way through to 3:30 p.m., our virtual symposium on the theme Innovation, Digital Government, and Changing Mindsets for public sector transformation. We were partnering with the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs, as well as other global and regional partners to deliver this. You heard Uralise's webinar today. You see that there's such an intersectionality between the innovation that we need in so many areas of public service and how we use digitalization, digital strategies, digital government strategies to foster that transformation. And also very foundational is how do we change our mindsets in order to have a very integrated approach to public sector transformation. So you want to look out for more information on that. We'll be sending out registration details soon. It is free. Free. And so you want to look out for that. We also have the call is out for our mid-level leadership development program. Now, Uralise is a graduate of this program. She was in cohort 18, dubbed the Platinum Leaders. Yes. And I guarantee you, you come and do this program, you'll be bright like Uralise. And just joking, but seriously though, we really are inviting applications for this mid-level leadership development program. It's a program that will equip you on leading self, leading your teams, leading for citizen-centered service. We focus on themes such as leading for a sustainable environment, leading ethically, and we have to take a very, very practical approach to leadership development. And you can bring your real world leadership projects in the workplace, and we'll give you lots of tools and insights that you can apply directly. And the program has been very well received, have received excellent reviews. And so if you want more information on that, visit our website at www.caricad.net. You can also contact us via email at info@caricad.net. Asking what is the cost? The cost has been reduced for this year, and the cost is a 3-month program, and it includes an emotional intelligence assessment and debriefing, and the cost is $2,000 per participant. All right. So with that, we want to invite you, lastly, our virtual producer will be putting in the chat a link to the evaluation poll for this webinar. There it is in the chat, and we invite you always to give us your feedback. We always say in our leadership programs, feedback is a gift, and so we want to hear from you. What's your feedback on this webinar? And also to get your suggestions for other webinars that you might want us to facilitate. And so with all of that, complete the poll for us. Thanks once again, Dr. Uralise Delaire, Platinum Leader from cohort 18. And I wish for you all the best for the rest of the day and the rest of the work week. You will receive via email a link to the recording and a link to and a copy of the slides. And if you missed it and other webinars, please just visit our YouTube page, Caribbean Center for Development Administration, and you will be able to access recordings to this and other webinars that we've done in the past. Thank you all. Have a good day.